Alright, you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Alright, welcome back everybody to the Men of Culture podcast. Here we are talking about episode number 7 of Percy Jackson and the Olympians season number 1. We're going to compare kind of this section of the episode, this one episode, to the section of that particular part of the story in the book, as well as the movie. And that's how we do this series here. If anyone's new here, well, if you're new, I would suggest you watch the rest of the videos first before you get to this point. But yeah, that's how we do it here on this podcast. We compare pieces of media, in this case, the Percy Jackson series, like the first part, the lightning thief part of the story.
Yep.
Within the show, the movie, and then also the book, which was the original. So, it starts pretty similarly in both honestly, I can't even say that. It honestly starts pretty differently in all three. So, I'll start with the movie first, because the movie's part is the shortest, the movie's underworld part is the shortest section out of all these three. There's really not that much happens. So, in the movie, they get there, they just find the entrance to the underworld somewhere in LA, and they find it, and there's this cave where there's Charon, the boatman, who takes people into the underworld on his boat. He's there, and then they try to go into the underworld, and then he's like, "You guys aren't dead." He's like, "Die and come back." And I thought it was a little funny at the way that he said "die and come back," and then even Grover's like, "Oh, well, we're not gonna die and come back." But and then then Grover kind of came to the conclusion that he likes dead people, so let me bribe him with cash.
Of course.
So he hands him money, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, I got you like dead people, right? Look, I got Andrew Jackson, I got Ulysses Grant, I got Benjamin Franklin." Like, he's like, "So if you let us into the underworld, you can have all this." He puts it in his hand and he burns the money. The Grover squeals a little bit, and then the idea pops into their mind: oh, the drachma, the golden drachma, the money of the gods. Oh yeah, someone who is related to the world of the gods. American cash probably doesn't matter to them.
Yeah, it doesn't.
So you probably should use the golden drachma, which they thought after Grover put that money in his hand and let him burn it.
Oh yeah, thanks. Benjamin Franklin got no sway on that conversation, bro.
That scene, I still think that. Honestly, that might be one of my favorite parts of the movie, honestly, because it was just so funny to see Grover put all that money in that man's hand and he burnt it.
I lost my mind when that happened, bro. That shit was funny.
I think I actually screamed a little bit. I'm like, "Yo, he burned the money!" Like,
if I ever saw somebody do that in real life, I might actually lose my mind.
yeah. But that was absolutely hilarious. So they give him the drachma, and then he's like, "All right, come aboard." And then they go to the underworld. He's taking them down the River Styx, and they see all of the kind of different items, like pocket watches, like desks, things that people really invested time into. The way they describe it is the River Styx is polluted with everybody's broken hopes and dreams, essentially, right? And so that's why you see a lot of these items in here. A lot of these items held a lot of value to somebody, and for some reason things didn't work out with it, and that's why it's there, right? It's polluted with people's broken hopes and dreams, right? So they're seeing all these things floating by as they're going through, and then they make it again, the River Styx it takes them directly to Hades' palace, and they go in. They did not face any obstacles in the underworld at all whatsoever, other than having to die and come back, according to Charon.
Yeah, die.
And Grover coming his buddy burned. But other than that, they didn't face any obstacles getting into the underworld and getting to Hades' palace. And they go in. There's not even really much of a fight, to be honest. And for also very weirdly, Persephone is here when she's not supposed to be, because because the whole thing, because this is the world of the gods, the way that the seasons work is that when Persephone is down in the underworld with Hades, that is what causes the change in the seasons. It's because her mother, Demeter, is upset that her daughter is not there, therefore she makes the weather more harsh as a way to kind of deal with it.
Right.
So, the fall and winter months is when Persephone is in the underworld. And during spring and summer, that is when she is up in Olympus. It's summertime in this game, in this show, this movie, and in this book. So Persephone should not be there, but she is.
Of course.
Now, even though like we didn't really see if it was like the end of the school year in the movie, which we kind of assumed it wasn't because it kind of everything just kind of happened so suddenly. But like you could tell it was at least spring or summertime because of the way that people were dressed, like the background characters and whatnot. Like it didn't seem particularly cold when they were in New York, and like I get it, regardless of the time of year, it's not going to feel cold in LA. But like they were in New York City and they were on Camp Half-Blood, where gets cold enough to snow there in the wintertime because it's on Long Island. So it's like, it was definitely in spring or summertime because we did not see any snow at all throughout the entire movie.
Right.
So why is Persephone there? And I feel like partially because they locked themselves into kind of having to include Persephone, because these pearls that they were collecting throughout the whole movie were Persephone's pearls.
Right.
Like, these pearls were essentially things that Persephone left out in the mortal world for people to collect so that they could come visit her while she's in the underworld, and then they would have a safe way to make it back home, right? So Persephone, whatever she was doing with these visitors, whether they were very special visitors or not, I don't know. But basically, she had these pearls that she gave out to people, or she put out in the world so some people could collect, so that they could come to the underworld and be able to leave safely, to help her tolerate her stay in the underworld a little bit more, right?
Right.
There would only be a reason for her to put those pearls out when she's in the underworld during the fall and winter months, right? But because they decided to call these things Persephone's pearls, they kind of had to lock themselves into like, well, if they're Persephone's pearls, we have to include Persephone. Like,
Of course.
so, because she wouldn't have these pearls out if she wasn't in the underworld. So, like, they kind of locked themselves into having to include Persephone. And then, like, then at the end, like, they only had 3 pearls, but there was 4 of them, because now you have Percy's mom that they're trying to leave with them. They all kind of argue a little bit over who's going to stay, and they kind of have that a little bit, like, in the book and in the show. But here they kind of argue a little bit, and then who ends up actually staying is Grover in the movie. Percy, Annabeth, and Percy's mom, they all have a pearl. They use that to leave the underworld, and then that's kind of the end of this section, right? So the rest relatively quick, like not that much happened again. In both the movie, or in both the book and in the show, they actually have a few obstacles that they have to go against as they get into the underworld. So, one of which being Procrustes' waterbeds, which is in both the show and in the book. It happens very differently in both, though. Like, they go into it in the show, and again, I feel like this is what we kind of mentioned before, like diminishing the danger.
Right.
Like, they walked in and they already knew that this was Procrustes' place, and that he somehow had an entrance to the underworld here, right?
Yeah.
Which, in the book, the entrance to the underworld wasn't even in his place, in the book. It was, again, in the book, they had a lot of just kind of stops that just happened to be dangerous, right?
Yes.
They weren't going there for any specific reason, but that was to kind of portray, yeah, there's danger around every corner, right? And so they kind of just stopped here in the book. And I think one thing that would have made this a little more funny, which was I mentioned before, that like because we don't have the internal dialogue from Percy that we had in the books, sometimes some of these humorous scenes or some of these deep scenes just won't feel the same. And I feel like that would be kind of been here, because like when Procrustes introduces himself to the group here, he says, "Hi, I'm Krusty," and then Percy is thinking, "Well, yes, you are." Like, that's something that you would find funny when you're reading it, but like something like that's not going to happen here because we don't have that eternal dialogue. So maybe that's why they went for it so differently here. But like in the book, they have no idea that this place is a traffic issue, right? But in the show, they walk in. Well, it looks like Percy's the only one there. It's again, they're like to separate everybody for some reason in this show. But like,
of course,
Percy's the only one there. We later see that Annabeth is wearing the invisibility cap. She's actually there, but it looks like at the moment Percy's the only one there. We don't see Grover. So then Percy already knows that this is Procrustes and that he traps them in the water beds and everything. And in the book, it took them a while to figure that out. Like, they were actually pretty tired, and, you know, they were like, you know what, let's take a sit on these beds, and then Grover and Annabeth got stuck in the beds. Like how Procrustes did, where they pushed him into the bed and entrapped him, you know, in the show. Yeah, Grover and Annabeth got trapped in the beds, or they got a little too close to the beds, and, like, he had, like, a word that he would say. I can't remember what it was, but he would say a word, and that would activate the beds, basically. And they were close enough to the beds to where it grabbed them and trapped them into the beds, and he was about to stretch them so that their arms and legs would be the perfect length to fit on said beds, right? Because the beds were 6 feet long, exactly. So he was going to stretch both of them being under 12-year-olds. None of them are 6 feet tall, so they were going to stretch them, right? And then Percy basically had to trick him into getting close enough to one of the beds so that Percy could say that word, and then it trapped him, right? And then they actually did kill him in the book. Like, they actually cut off his head because he was like 10 feet tall in the book, and so his head was hanging over the edge of the bed, so they cut off his head. The machine would cut off their head, or cut off their head like in their feet if they were too tall for it, and if they were tall enough for it, it would stretch them out, right?
Right.
So they actually killed him in the book. In the show, they didn't kill him; they just left him trapped there. And then Grover like walks in after the end. He's like, "Oh, is it all over?" Like, I just felt like this scene just felt like very underwhelming, and it was just really an excuse to include this scene right before they go to the underworld. Because, like I said, in the book, the underworld was not here. It was actually in an abandoned radio company, which was like had like a whole elevator to like take you down to like the river Styx to like sail on the underworld and everything. But like, this just felt like an excuse to kind of include Procrustes, because like they were like, oh well, this is a place that they stop at in the book, so we want to include it, and we didn't have the time to include it.
Right.
But it just does not feel the same. Like, again, it kind of diminishes the danger when they just go into everything knowing how everything works. Like, Percy walked into it in the show, and he's like, I know who you are. You're Procrustes. You stretch people on these beds, and you trick people. You try to trick me into trying out one of your beds, and then you're going to stretch me to fit the bed. Like, there's no reason for Percy to know all that information at this point in his life. Like, Percy is still very inexperienced compared to like how he's going to be as we continue to see him progress through this series.
Right. So
there's no reason. Well, again, he has Annabeth who knows a lot. Like, there are still things that she doesn't know. And in the book, even Annabeth didn't even realize who it was at first. So it's like, there's no reason for them to go into this already knowing who this is.
Right.
So that just made it just feel, again, it made the quest feel a lot less dangerous. It makes the quest feel a lot less like an achievement to this group in a way. because it just feels like, in the book it just felt like everything was just so crazy, and it feel like they were just barely getting by at times, but it doesn't really feel the same way in the show. And I think that's partially because they do some things that make these events feel less dangerous in the show than they did in the book, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does make it feel a lot less. I don't know. It just makes it feel like a lot less of an achievement to the group, from my perspective. I mean, and that's not to say that it has to be dangerous or it's not an achievement at all. But like, it definitely just feels like that when you go through things that are more dangerous, you come out of it, you do end up stronger because of it, and that just goes to show really how strong you are if you survived all these obstacles, right? All of these dangerous obstacles where you could have died at any time, like, but it didn't really feel like the danger was on the same level as it was in the book.
Right.
So, like, yeah, so here, like, especially in the movie, there was no danger. They faced no danger on the way to the underworld at all. But, like, in the book, after they got through Procrestus, then they find the radio company where the underworld is, right? So they go there, and then there's Charon, and he's wearing, like, this, like, very, like, expensive Italian suit, they say. And, like, they try to get into the underworld. He realizes they're not dead. And then, like, he goes on and he mentions how, like, things are getting more difficult, and because, there's been a lot of people that have died in the last century, more so than it has the century before that. And so the underworld's getting really busy, and he has to deal with a lot of dead people coming through trying to get into the underworld and everything. And then so he's like, and then he mentions that he hasn't had a pay raise in 1,000 years. And as he's doing this was, like, honestly, I thought was hilarious in the book, and I wish they would have included it in the show. But, like, Percy is, like, really basically trying to bribe him into letting him into the underworld here, because he has the golden drachma, right? And then Percy is like, yeah, you deserve so much better. You deserve appreciation. You deserve recognition, better pay. And as he's saying this, he's stacking more and more coins onto the table, trying to bribe this man into letting them into the underworld. And the funny thing is that it's working. Like, the guy is like, yeah, you're right. And then as Percy is stacking more coins on the counter just to bribe this guy, he's like, I'll definitely make sure that I bring up that you want a pay raise to Hades when I see him. And that's pretty much what convinces this man to just let them into the underworld and, like, go onto the boat. And as they go onto the boat, they're in the river Styx. They see the broken hearts, the broken pieces of people's broken hearts and dreams and whatnot, their hopes and dreams being destroyed by whatever it was, right? They see, like, artifacts that represent they're seeing those as they go through the river Styx. And then Charon mentions, like, yeah, he's like, you humans are so bad at keeping your dreams together, or something along those lines, basically. And he's like, you humans, like, all you do is create these hopes and dreams, and you never live them out. They always end up broken, kind of thing, right? So they see that as they're going through. They end up making it basically to the front gates of the underworld, basically. And it is completely different in the book than it is in the show. Now, one of the complaints that a lot of people had with the underworld in the show is that they felt like it was very bland looking, right? Now, I think that some parts of the underworld they actually did really well, because I never actually imagined the underworld being like this very colorful, kind of happy-looking place. It's the underworld. It's supposed to look depressing. It's supposed to look kind of, like, dark. Like, I imagine, like, again, like, very dark skies, like, kind of, like, you don't see, like, any sunshine or anything. I would imagine, like, a lot of black-looking plants and kind of like that. Like, I would imagine because like especially when we get to the part where they talk about the fields of asphodel, right?
Yes.
In the book and in the movie, well, it's not in the movie at all. They didn't show it. But in the book and in the show, it looks very different, right? So how they get here in the book or in the show, excuse me, is that they go to Charon and he's just kind of like at like a random river, like kind of the gate to the underworld, and then they try to bribe him too. They're like, oh, he's like, you're not dead. And they're like, oh, well, Pierce was like, oh, we're all kind of dying in some fashion. Like, I thought that was a little funny. But like, then he was like, and then you didn't pay the fee. And they were like, oh, we can pay. They tried to pay, and he just kind of calls Cerberus to come after them.
Yeah.
And so he chases them through the underworld.
Right.
They do have to deal with Cerberus in the book, but it goes a lot differently. Like, basically, the way that Annabeth is able to kind of like take him in the movie, in the show, it's a lot different than how she does it in the book, right? She basically is kind of like has a ball and is playing sex with him, and is like kind of being very stern, like telling him to sit, telling him to roll over, kind of thing. Like, she is basically like putting this dog through a weed school, essentially, right?
Right.
But like in the show, she kind of just like pets him and puts him to sleep, like. But this is after, and this is where I kind of have my frustration here. And like I mentioned it, like when they gave me the last episode, when we mentioned that Percy was given 4 of the pearls. So Grover gets snatched up by Cerberus, right? And in the process, the dog like pretty much swallows him. And in the process of that, he loses the pearl in the dog, right? So it's like they gave us that 4th pearl that was like, oh, is he going to be able to save his mom? Or is everyone going to be able to leave? But no, they had to just conveniently lose it right there just so that we have to face the dilemma of having 3 pearls. I'm like, if you wanted us to face the dilemma of only having 3 pearls, why didn't you just give him 3 pearls from the start?
Right.
Why did you have to give him a 4th only to take it away at the beginning of the next episode? Like, that's where I get a little frustrated here. And that's where some other people I've seen online got frustrated too. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, you gave them 4 pearls, and then they even said, like, oh yeah, like, Percy was like, oh, there's 4 of them. And then the water spirit told him, yeah, save the world, then go save your mother. Like, you have everything you need to do so do it, right? That is what she is telling him. But then they had to include this storyline, this little part where Grover gets snatched up by Cerberus and he swallows the pearl, so that we have to face this dilemma of only having 3 pearls. But if you wanted that dilemma in, why didn't you just leave it like it was in the book, where he only got 3? Like, it just doesn't make any sense, and it just feels like, again, just adding something in that's just super unnecessary and doesn't really add anything to the plot. Because you wanted to have the narrative that they only had 3 pearls, and that's what you did, but you had a very wish-washy way of doing it. Like, so, I know it sounded a little frustrated there when I talked about that portion, but like, that was where this episode started to get a little frustrating for me. It's because I personally don't like when TV shows like to write something in and then immediately delete it for absolutely no reason, and I felt like this was one of those instances. Right? So, the Fields of Asphodel look very different in both the book and in the show. In the book, they basically describe it as, imagine you're in like this endless wheat field in Kansas, right? It looks like you have wheat for miles, you don't see anything but wheat all around you, right? But all of those wheat fields are black. So instead of white wheat, imagine a black, endless field in Kansas that you see nothing but black wheat around. And that's the Fields of Asphodel, right? Very depressing sounding, but this is where most people in the world go, as they describe in the book and both in here in the show as well. They describe it in the movie because it wasn't there. But basically, that's what it is. It's like kind of, very depressing, but there are worse because there's also the Fields of Punishment, the place where people who are really bad go to.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically face eternal punishment because of the bad things they did in their life.
Mm-hmm.
But the good place is Elysium, where it's basically like eternal pleasure, basically, because it basically looks like a resort where you have everything you'll ever want, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's Elysium. That's where the very few people go, because very few people in the world really do a lot of good in their life, And they explain it why the Fields of Asphodel is so crowded is because most people don't do anything particularly amazing or particularly really bad. Most people just live, right?
Yeah, of course.
So it might be kind of depressing to think about, but most people just kind of are here. They live their time on the planet and then they're gone. They didn't do anything incredibly spectacular. At the same time, they never did anything particularly really bad. So they just lived. And so that's where most people go. And it's also a way that some people are afraid of what they would be judged, because basically they didn't mention this in the show, but in the book they mentioned that every single person basically sits in front of a judge, right?
Mm-hmm.
They look at all the deeds that they did in their life and they determine where they go, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they didn't really do that much, they go to the Fields of Asphodel. If they were a very good person, they go to Elysium. If they were really bad, they go to the Fields of Punishment, and Miss Dodds and her sisters will plan eternal punishment for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't mention that at all in the show. They go to the Fields of Asphodel, but it looks like more so like they're in the woods kind of thing. We see the people in there that are kind of just standing there lifelessly, because that's how the Fields of Asphodel is. And they mention it much later in the series, but people actually have no memory of anything pretty much from their lives.
Mm-hmm.
When they're there, they're literally just kind of lifeless beings, basically zombies.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They don't do any harm, they don't do anything, they just sit in those fields for eternity.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so they showed that, but then they kind of show that when you're at the top of the valley in the book, that you can kind of see all three places in the underworld where you go in the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
And they mention how Elysium looks so small. And this is again more of Percy's internal dialogue. He's Elysium is so much smaller than these other places. Such few people do really good things in their life, and it's depressing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm again, that's a kind of important thing that I feel there, that they put there. That's also something that just wasn't in the show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of these important moments do really make a difference, whether you take them out, whether you think they're small or not.
Mm-hmm.
And in the show, or in the book, they had this little scene that as they're going into the underworld, they see one of the guys being judged who just died, and it was actually a priest who, I guess he had become really big in his community, and he said that he was trying to raise money to donate to a children's hospital, but then he actually used all that money to just buy himself nice stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, he was being judged, right? And this is one thing that I knew that they would not put Disney in this show, because Disney has to Disney-fy it,
Mm-hmm.
is that Percy actually curses here in the book.
Mm-hmm.
He says hell. So they say that because Grover is hey Percy, you remember this guy from the news, right? And they're oh yeah, he ended up dying when he got into a car accident, when he was being chased by the police.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're so doesn't this seem wouldn't this seem very crazy to him if he's a priest and he believes in a different kind of hell? That's literally how Percy orders it. And I was Disney would never allow that in the show.
No, of course not.
They would never allow a 12-year-old to say a word like that in the show. So I knew that they weren't going to include it, but then they kind of reinforce the mist here in the book, which I really like, is they're like, well, who's to say that like he sees this the way that we're seeing it? They're like, Grover's like, humans are very stubborn people, and they really are. I'll tell you that. They really are.
Yeah, for sure.
He was like, and like also there's still the mist even there. Like, people will see things the way they want to see them. The mist kind of makes it to where people see things the way that they think that they will believe that they see it. So for all he knows, like, this guy might not even realize what is even happening to him right now. He might not realize that he's being judged for basically stealing money from his community to buy himself nice stuff. Like, he might see it as actually he's in heaven. Like, we don't know. Like, because we don't get to see this guy's perspective, but it does give you more insight into the idea that, like, yeah, the mist really can alter the way that people see things. Like, and it might sound crazy at times because it's like, well, how do they not see that? But like, again, like, it's designed to kind of protect these people in a way, because they're gonna see things that are very strange. They're gonna see them in ways that they can believe, right? Like, and we'll see that as more as we continue on through the series. But this is kind of another instance of that. Like, this guy who is being judged for stealing from his community and buying himself nice stuff and gold-plated toilets or something like that. I think they said in the book. Like, he is being judged for his very poor behavior and poor actions as a human being, but he might not realize that. So that's just how people are. So here in the book, they also do. They basically say that, like, the path into the underworld, to like these 3 different parts of the underworld, think of it like airport security. They literally have like metal detectors as these dead people are checking into the underworld.
Yeah.
But like in the show, there's none of that. It looks very barren. It looks like kind of very like there's nothing here. But the fact that, like, it looks like airport security, they have like metal detectors to get into the underworld, like, that's actually kind of insane what the book was like. And then like I said, Annabeth has to kind of like play fetch with Cerberus to get them to let them go. Then they get past him. They have magic items on them, like Percy's sword and whatnot, so that sets off the metal detectors, and Cerberus starts chasing them, and then they end up in the fields of Asphodel, right? And then here, this is where this episode frustrated me again, because we've talked about it before, but again, they just love to separate this trio so much in this show, and it's really annoying all the time, and I'm going to say it every single time they do it, because they do it right here. Because as they're going through the fields of Asphodel, they kind of mention again here that most people kind of just live. They don't really do anything spectacular or really bad. Most people kind of just live a regular life and don't do anything extraordinary in any way, shape, or fashion. So they go to the fields of Asphodel, where it's just literally just bland. Again, like I said, in the book, they describe it as an endless wheat field in Kansas, except all the wheat is black, right? In here, it looks like a kind of wooded area, and it does look very bland, and these people are kind of just like, they looked at them, they kind of have their legs have turned into roots, like with the ground, so it's almost like they're just part of the environment, right? So, but like, it just doesn't look anything like they described it in the book, and it was kind of weird to see that, but at the same time, I wasn't really getting too upset about that. But like, a lot of people did find distaste in how the underworld looked, and like, we don't really get much of a glimpse into Elysium at all in the show. And the same thing with the Fields of Punishment. We just kind of know that they're a thing, and they kind of mention it when like they're looking at all of it, and then Percy's like thinking like, oh, that's where I want to go, and then Annabeth almost kind of reads his mind and is like, yeah, that's kind of the idea. All heroes want to go to Elysium, right? And so like, again, that aspect just wasn't in the show. Like, they get through Cerberus, and then they start heading towards Hades' palace. And at the edge of the fields of Asphodel, that's when Annabeth gets stuck. They all try to get her out from like the roof that she's trapped on, and then she's like, "Oh, I have a pearl. I can get out of here." All right, and here they're separating them, right? Why? why did they separate them? In the book, they were not separated, by the way. They all made it to the underworld together in the book. But I'll continue going through this scene in the show, and then compare it to the book as we continue to go through. Like I said, basically described it in the movie entirely. But so here in the show, Annabeth has to use the pearl to escape because Cerberus is still chasing them, and he's still chasing them in the book too. But he's chasing them right now, and she has to use the pearl to get out, right? So Annabeth is officially out in the underworld, right? So then they start continuing to head towards Hades' palace after they saw like the kind of flash from Annabeth using the pearl. They knew she was okay. Like then they start heading towards Hades' palace, and they start getting dangerously close to the edge of Tartarus, right? This is where Kronos is sitting, chopped up into pieces after Zeus, Poseidon, and Hera and all the Olympians. Well, all the Olympians, the oldest Olympians anyway. Not like Ares and like Aphrodite, the younger ones, right?
Right.
Well, Hephaestus, I think Aphrodite is actually one of the younger ones. But, you know, the first generation Olympians, they cut him all up and threw him into Tartarus, right? So this is where he is, right? And so then Grover's shoes start to like lift him out of the air. And again, like the shoes were not ever an issue in the movie. Like the shoes were never designed to purposely drag Percy into Tartarus, but they were in both the book and in the show, right? So the shoes start flying on their own towards the edge, towards Tartarus, the endless depth, right? So they start heading over there, and then Percy's like, Grover, what are you doing? And he's like, I don't have control over these shoes. And they start flying, and in the book, Grover gets a lot more beat up from this. Like, Grover kind of walks away from it in the show with really no injuries at all. But, like, in the book, he's, like, scraping himself up against the ground, trying to, like, hold on to things to stop himself from being pulled into the pit. And, like I said, Percy and Annabeth are here in the book, but in the show, it's just Percy and Grover, right? So, Percy does eventually grab onto Grover in the show, and then he uses his sword to kind of anchor themselves into the ground. And the shoes are still pulling so hard they end up pulling themselves off of Grover's feet. They fly into the pit, right? And in the book, it's kind of happened a little similarly. Well, actually, no, because they don't actually grab a hold of Grover. Grover ends up grabbing a hold of something himself. And so they're running after him. Grover is moving too quickly for them to catch him in the book. So then he ends up hitting a rock, and he holds on to that rock, right? And when he hits that rock, it's enough force to like fling one of the shoes off of his feet. So he holds on to that rock, and he just like holds there until the other one pulls off. And then like the shoes, they catch up to Grover. The shoes actually kick them in the heads before they fly away into the pit, right? So that's how it happened in the book, right? And then they kind of like get up, they describe that, oh, this is the place that you saw in your dream, Percy, because Percy, remember, he said that he had a dream where he was hearing somebody as like from a voice of like a dangerous, like sharp voice coming from a dark pit. This is where he was hearing it from. So that's what they said, and then they were like, they quickly kind of just like get together, then head back to towards Hades' palace, right? In the show, this is where they find out that the lightning bolt was in their bag, right? In the book, this doesn't happen. They end up just going to the underworld, or going to Hades' palace, and they find out in Hades' palace, right? So, in the book and in the show, Hades is completely different. I do not like him in the show at all. Honestly, I think they did a really bad job with him this time.
Yeah,
quite honestly.
He was a pretty weak performance for me personally.
Like, I felt like he was better in, like, I don't know if I want to say he was better in the movie, because he was better in the movie. He didn't quite compare to the way he's in the book either. Like, in the book, they describe him as kind of like radiating power, right? Like, a lot of these gods have this aura that, like, it just makes you feel their power. Like, the way that they described it in the book is that like Percy, when he felt Hades' aura, he just felt like, oh, like he's better than me. He knows more than me. He's better at fighting than me, right? He kind of like emits this aura that just makes you look down on yourself in a way, because that's how powerful he is, right? He doesn't do that at all in the show, right? Like in the book, he's like very fierce, like, and not only that, but again, he is like 10 feet tall. So, like, he looks absolutely huge. Persephone is not there because she's not supposed to be during this time of the year. And you could definitely feel that, like, Hades was completely in control of the situation. And, like, he's the one who truly dictates who dies and who gets away right now, right? That was not the case in the show, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, in the book, like Hades, like I said, he's being very fierce. He has that aura about him. Like, he's going on, and then, like, when they say that, like, because remember, Hades believes that Percy has the bolt right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at this moment in the book, the group, they truly don't believe that they have the lightning bolt. They believe that Hades has it, and they've come to take it from him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then as they're saying that, Hades is like, no, I don't have the bolt. And then he was like, why would I want the bolt? And they're like, because you want to start a fight with a war between your brothers because of jealousy kind of thing. They say that in the show too. And he was like, why would I be jealous of them? He was like, I actually kind of like being in my own little section where I don't have to deal with their drama. Like, and he was like, not only that, he's like, I got plenty of work to do. And he was like, you know, and he's like, I got like my employees that I gotta pay overtime pay. And
Right.
he's like, and then he's like, oh, and he's like, do you realize how many employees I have now that I've had to bring in because we have all of these people that are dying and coming to the underworld at a fast rate. So that means more overtime pay. And then Percy brings it out. He's like, oh yeah, Charon wants a raise. And he's like, don't even get me started on him. He's like, because ever since that man discovered Italian suits, now he thinks he needs more money to buy all the Italian suits. And, like, Hades is getting really bad here. And like I said, you can really feel in the book that Hades is in complete control of this situation. Hades is the one who decides who lives and dies right here, right now, right? And that's not the case in the book. Like, Hades comes in or that's not the case in the show, excuse me. Hades comes in, and then he's like, alright, you guys know who I am, I know who you are, so we can just skip the introduction part. And then he was like, oh, can I get you guys anything? Would you like a snack? Would you like a drink? Like, I'm like, this is not Hades.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, since when is Hades just like, oh yeah, we can skip introductions, like, you know who I am, I know who you are, like, we don't need to do that. Can I get you something to drink? Can I get you something to eat? Like, Hades is not welcoming them in his home in the book. But he is just like, oh yeah, y'all want something to drink? You want to sit down, relax, kind of thing? Like this is not Hades at all. And then Percy's like, my mother, I want my mother. And he's like, oh, straight to business. Well, okay, okie dokie. He literally says okie dokie at some point. And then he's like, okay, your mother's right over here. And then I'm just like, this is not Hades. Why does he act like this? Like, this is the god of the dead people, the god of the underworld. He's supposed to be fierce. Like, but this guy just seems like some random guy who you would never expect to be the god of the underworld, right? Now, he did share the same sentiment of, like, not really wanting anything to do with, like, Poseidon and Zeus' beef. He wanted nothing to do with that at all, in both the book and in the show.
Yeah.
And, well, no, in the movie, actually, I think he flat out just wanted the bolt. Like, he flat out just wanted the bolt in the movie just to have the power, right?
Right,
so,
of course.
Like, there was no, like, Kronos behind the scenes.
No,
like this, right?
he was just
he flat out wanted the bolt.
Like, yeah, he just wanted the power, bro. It was not even like that for him, bro. Like, he had no interest in anything that was going on surface level at all.
Like in the book and in the show, like, again, he wants nothing to do. But it's like, so when they say that and they realize that, okay, well then, if he truly doesn't want anything to do with, like, their beef, then he has no reason to take the bolt. Then they realize in the book, because Hades keeps saying, you have the bolt, Percy, and then he's like, no, I don't, you do, and he's like, oh, check your bag. Then they open the bag and they see it in there, right? And then they're trying to be like, oh, this is mistake. Like, Ares gave me this bag. He was the one who, put the bolt in the bag, or he did something with it. Like, so they know at this point, yeah, Ares is the one that caused it, because the Ares gave them that bag that has the bolt in it. And we learn a little bit from Ares later on at the very end, like, that part happens in the next episode. But, like, yeah, Ares basically breaks it with some magic to where the bolt didn't actually appear in the backpack until they got to the underworld. Mm-hmm. So the entire time that Percy had it while he was up on the surface, it wasn't actually in the bag. It's kind of weird, but given that this is the world that they have shown to us, where they have Greek gods and goddesses that have these incredible abilities, it's not too hard to imagine in this world.
Of course.
So yeah, that's basically what he did. And like I said, they find out at basically the edge of Tartarus in the show. And then Percy already puts it together in the show that this was Kronos the whole time, right? Mm-hmm. Because he was like, I had him talking in my dreams. He's like telling me to bring him the bolt and like join him because he needs to bring downfall on Olympus and whatnot. He's like, I thought it was you, but he's like, that was not your voice I heard. I know that now. And he's like, that was Kronos, right? Mm-hmm. And in the book, they don't quite put together that it's Kronos just yet. Like, they do kind of mention it at the very end of the book, and like Percy's mind starts to kind of run a little bit to think of the possibilities, but they don't really come to that conclusion yet in the book. Mm-hmm. But like Percy came to the conclusion completely, and now Hades is like, okay, new offer, I need the bolt. Like, give me it, because if more with Kronos is coming, I need to be able to defend myself, right? Mm-hmm. So here in the book and in the show, it's pretty similar in the choice they make, but basically they've made it all the way here, and they decide to get Hades' Helm of Darkness, which is missing, because that was also stolen on the winter solstice. Mm-hmm. Hades didn't tell anybody because he thought maybe pretty much no one would help him. And honestly, probably because everyone treats him as if he's kind of an outcast kind of thing. So he decided to not consult any of them, and he tried to figure it out on his own. Who stole it? And he believed it was Percy. Mm-hmm. And he believed that's why he took his mom, because if he believed that he used his mom as a bargaining tool, then Percy would just give him the helm back so that he could have his mom back. Right?
Right.
So that is why he took his mom, and that is why he believed he could deal with Percy. But then Percy was like, no, I didn't take the helm. He was like, oh, well, Ares is the one who initiated this whole thing, so Ares probably still has it. So he tells Hades, he's like, I'll be back, I'm gonna go get your helm, and then please, like, free my mother, right? Mm-hmm. And before he leaves in the book, again, this is another really, like, deep moment. Like, Percy, like, he hands Grover and Annabeth the pearls, and then he has the last one in his hand, right? Mm-hmm. And he turns and he looks at his mom, and he says, in the eternal dialogue, he wanted so badly to use the last one on his mom and sacrifice himself. But he said he knew if he tried that she just would not allow it. She would not allow him to leave himself and save her, right? Mm-hmm. And then again, the prophecy echoes in his head. He will fail to save what matters most in the end, that being his mom, right? Mm-hmm. And so he has no choice but to use the pearls on himself and leave his mother in the underworld, right? Mm-hmm. In the movie, they just saved his mom, right? Grover had stayed behind, but there was no prophecy. He ended up saving what mattered the most in the end, I guess, being his mom in the movie, right? Mm-hmm. And then his mom goes to Olympus with them for some reason. I don't know why, but we'll get to that when we get to that in the last episode, right? But
yes, of course.
But like here, like I said, it was just so emotional there, and it was kind of deep here in the show where, they have like the memories. We had a few memories that happened in this episode, like the first one being where like Percy was being checked into that new school, and he really didn't want to go, and like Percy and like his mom Sally is like really struggling to like really comes to terms that like she kind of just can't be around Percy, and she's got to try to send him to these schools that are going to be better fit for him because he has what they think are some of these learning disabilities. But like a lot of times, it requires her to send him away somewhere where she can't always be with him, right? And so they showed us these scenes where like he kind of is in the car and he just keeps saying, "I'm not going," like, and then he locks the door, and then his mom's like, "Oh, Percy, we've talked about this. This is what's best for you. You might have sometimes you kind of have to just do things that you have to trust me and do these things that I need you to do that you might not always understand, right?" And she's getting a little frustrated with him. And I know these scenes like made a lot of people say that they felt like Sally was a bad mom, but I really didn't feel that way from these memories, right? And I can assume that we can assume that Percy has these memories going on in his head as this quest is going, right? And especially with the last one, which I'll get to in a little bit, but I just feel like she's not a bad mom. I just feel like she's really a struggling mom.
Yeah, of
because she is a single parent to this kid, right?
Yeah.
At this point, she hasn't met Gabe, so she is a single mom to this kid. She has no one that's really able to help her because Poseidon can't, because he can't get too involved with his children.
Right.
So she's a single parent, and because he's a demigod, he has some of these issues with the regular world that other kids just aren't gonna have, and it's never an easy life for a demigod, and she knows that, and just seeing how he struggled in school, and out of all the challenges that she knows he's inevitably gonna have as he continues to get older, and he starts to attract attention from the godly world. She even says that in another memory, which we actually see later in this same episode, when she's actually having a conversation with Poseidon, that he's starting to attract attention from his world, right? And so she doesn't know what to do. She's scared of what's going to happen, and she's just really struggling to figure out what's the right thing to do in this situation. So I don't think she's a bad mom. I just think that she's overwhelmed. I just think that she really just doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And honestly, can you blame her?
No, you can't.
Given that, your child's a demigod, he's probably gonna have a really rough life because of that.
Yeah.
And you see he's struggling. He's gonna continue to struggle, and you just don't know what you can do to fix it. Anybody in that instance would be overwhelmed, and you have nobody else around you to kind of help you with it, right? It's all on you. That is extremely overwhelming, and so I don't think she's a bad mom from these scenes, right?
No, she's just struggling mom.
Towards the end, when we have they're in Hades' palace, and we have the last memory of where Percy and his mom are at this place getting milkshakes, and this was we talked about how some scenes are difficult to watch, but in a good way because of how emotional they are.
Yeah.
And this one hit pretty hard. So here they're drinking the milkshakes, and then Percy is just kind of very reluctant to talk to his mom because he's very upset. He doesn't understand why she's sending him away, and so he's hardly even touching his milkshake at all. And then she tells him, she's like, "Come on, Percy, this is gonna be our last day together. Come on, we don't want to make our last day together for a while to be this horrible memory kind of thing, right? So let's make this last day a good one, right?" And then Percy says what is absolutely heartbreaking to hear is, "Why? Why are you trying so hard to send me away?" And to me, then you can just see that his mom is fighting back tears when he says that, because from his perspective, he's just a little kid. He's like, "Why is my mom sending me away?" kind of thing. He doesn't realize why she's doing the things she's doing. So you understand why he would ask that question, but at the same time, to hear your child ask you that question, is absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how you can explain it, and she doesn't. She just kind of says, "Yeah, I'm gonna go pay for the ice cream or the milkshakes," kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that when I saw that for the first time, I'm just like, "Wow, that is like not something that's easy to hear from your kid." Like,
no, definitely not for sure. Like, definitely not. Because like that moment, like, because you're seeing it from both perspectives. You're seeing it from Percy's side, where he's just this little kid who just wants to be around his mom, and he doesn't really have a father around, and so it's like the only parent he's ever known is kind of like pushing him away, and kind of setting him off to under what she would consider sending him off to a circumstance that would be better for him to be able to acclimate, right, or to be able to adjust and to better his life, the typical parent choice, you know what I mean? And then, like you said, he's a little kid. His mom can't explain the situation to him, you know what I mean, in full detail. And I think that's pretty much what's killing him. I mean, it's what's killing both of them, actually, especially her, because, she's just a struggling mom with this, like, little kid, and, her kid has all these questions, and you can't give him answers because he's not old enough, and it's like, it's a messy situation all around, and I think that, like, personally was, like, I think one of the most, like, definitely one of the most heart-wrenching scenes, and I think one of the more compelling ones for sure. Like, I think, like, that scene, like, definitely was definitely a favorite of mine from this particular season for sure. Like, because it really showed, like, just how deep, like, the bond between, like, Percy and his mom, like, really ran, you know what I mean? Because they were, like, as thick as thieves, you know what I'm saying? Like, they have each other's backs, you know what I'm saying? Like, they only really have each other. And I know if Poseidon was there, right, he would want to be more. He obviously has expressed, that he wants to be there, it's a couple of episodes, we'll get to that in a second, but, he obviously wants to be there, but, he can't because of extenuating circumstances, so, it's, it's heartbreak all around for, like, for everyone involved, like, especially Percy and his mom, because they're just caught in a rock and a hard place. They don't really have, like, a solution to any of the problems that they're facing,
Yeah. And that's like that scene, like I said, that scene was absolutely heartbreaking. And then, like, we kind of, like, fast forward to, like, another scene, like, towards the very end of the episode, where, like, we see Sally is actually talking with Poseidon, which is actually different than the book because she never really talks to him much.
Yeah.
But, like, he was talking to her here, right? And then at this point, Sally has basically decided that she was going to send Percy to Camp Half-Blood at that point in time when Percy's like 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's because she truly thinks it's going to be best for him because they'll show him how to fight, they'll train him, and they'll show him what he needs to protect himself because they mentioned, like, they showed these scenes where, like, he's struggling to get into these schools because, like, they're very concerned that these schools are not equipped to take care of him because he saw things, like, he saw a Pegasus on a rooftop, he drew it, and he followed it. Like, the Pegasus followed him up to the top of the rooftop, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's starting to attract attention from the god's world, and she even said it's only a matter of time before he starts attracting dangerous things from your world, like monsters, right, that could attack him and hurt him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why she was ready to send him to camp right then and there, even though she really didn't want to. And Poseidon was like, "You don't want to?" And she's like, "No," but she's like, "I feel like, what choice do I have?" Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then she talked about how, like, how some of the people within the family of the gods can be, and she's like, again, but Percy's not like that. And then Poseidon's like, "Well, I think that you have your answer. He needs to be with his mother. Like, his mother raised him to not be that way, and he still needs his mother's guidance, so he needs to be with you." And so she does ultimately decide to keep Percy nearby. We know that he goes to like Yancey Academy, which is like a boarding school. But she does keep him relatively close by instead of sending him to camp, where she won't ever really get to see him much, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where we get to the end here. They use, like I said in the show, they use the pearls again. Percy's mom always told Percy, hold fast, Percy, and he tells her, hold fast here as he goes, and he says he's gonna go find the helm and then bring it back, and then he would let his mother go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, they use the pearls. They end up going back up to the beach in Santa Monica. Actually, in the movie, it takes them directly to the Empire State Building, but we'll go more into that, I guess, next episode.
Mm-hmm.
But here in the book and in the show, it takes them on to Santa Monica. And then Annabeth is there. She made it out in the show. Again, they're finally reunited after they decided to separate them for a little bit. But like I said, in the book, they were all together in the underworld facing Hades, and then they all go back up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the episode ends here, which we see Ares is standing over there with his sword drawn, ready to fight them, and then Percy draws his sword, ready to start the fight. And that is where we're left off in the show. And we'll go more into detail about it in the next episode, because this fight between Percy and Ares was the biggest thing that I was looking forward to in this entire season. Like, I remember when they announced this series, like, I already knew. I was like, okay, the coolest thing in this entire book, like the best part, in my opinion, was the fight between Percy and Ares.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, I can't wait to see how they depict that in live action, because they didn't depict that in the book, or the movie, because Ares wasn't in the movie at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I really can't wait to see how they depict that. And so I remember when I watched this episode and I had to wait the next week for the last one, I was like, man, I really can't wait to see how they do that fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, in the book, it ends pretty similarly. They make it out. There's an earthquake in LA because Hades has started an earthquake to attack them as they left, which he kind of doesn't really do that for some reason in the show, because for whatever reason he's more nonchalant. It's just like, oh yeah, well, like, we don't have to worry about that. Just give me my helm. You're good. Like, you're good, man. Like,
yeah.
That's how he is in the show for some reason. But like, so the Furies and multiple other enemies are like chasing them, and then they're like, okay, well, we have to get the wolf back to Zeus before the deadline ends, because the deadline has not ended in the book yet. It has in the show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't end in the movie, so they still have time left, but they don't in the show. And then Percy's thinking like, okay, well, first we have to have a word with my cousin Ares, right? Because they realize that Ares kind of set them up, right? So that's kind of where we're left off there, right? Where they're getting ready to go and meet Ares and have the fight. So that's the end of this episode. I think it was better than the last one. Like I said, the casino episode was the worst episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
The casino episode was absolutely bad. And even though I had my issues with this one, specifically the fact that they like to separate them, like they've done this entire season, and then like just the addition of the fourth pearl only to create a situation where they had to lose it so that we would have the dilemma of having the three pearls, that I felt like was completely unnecessary. You should just give them 3 from the beginning so that we would just have that dilemma, instead of giving them 4, thinking we're not going to have it, and then you have to create a situation that forces us to have it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you wanted us to have a dilemma, just have them give them 3 pearls. Like, the book did that, and it worked out just fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was my issue, and then the fact that they had to like have Annabeth get stuck and force her to use a pearl to get out,
Mm-hmm.
so that they could separate them, right?
Mm-hmm. No,
So
for
it
sure.
is what it is. That's what they're planning to do with this series, I guess. But
It is
you know,
what
I
it
think
is.
it was just better when they're always together kind of thing. I feel like they're all experiencing everything together, and it makes them all stronger together.
Oh yeah, of course.
So, but it is what it is. So that's where we end things right here. The next episode, we're gonna go into the final episode of the season, and we'll finally wrap up Percy Jackson and the Olympians season 1, The Lightning Thief. Kind of our little podcast series about it. So, like I said, there's not that much left that happens in the movie either. Like I said, the end of the movie is kind of, they cut out a lot, so there's not that much to talk about here. But like I said, the last episode of the show does include the fight with Ares, and then this portion of the book is really like kind of the last like 2 to 3 chapters of the book that this episode encompasses roughly. So we still have a little bit left in the book and in the show to go over, but like I said, it's the last episode. We're definitely gonna make sure that we talk about everything we need to talk about in that one episode. It's not gonna be split up or anything. And then after that, we have plans to go on to Avatar: The Last Airbender live action and probably some other things. I know we mentioned we definitely want to talk about some Ben 10 at some point, in some way or fashion. We'll figure out specifically what topic to discuss, but I know we definitely want to talk about Ben 10. We definitely want to talk about some Invincible, because Invincible Season 2 just ended like a couple months ago. So we definitely want to talk about some Invincible. Maybe some actual Avatar: The Last Airbender stuff, considering that we are getting a movie next year about that. So, and we'll have news kind of floating around here and there in between now and the release date. So there's potentially things like that we could talk about. And I know you definitely said, and I definitely want to too. We definitely want to talk about the Spider-Verse movies.
Oh yeah,
so,
absolutely.
And definitely leading up to next year when we get the third one, yeah, we're definitely gonna have to do some stuff about Spider-Verse.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So yeah, we got a lot of kind of ideas flowing around, kind of brainstorming some things that we could talk about over this series. So it's not just going to be flat out like kind of, oh, let's review the season of a TV show kind of thing every single time. Like I feel like something I was planning on wanting to do for Invincible was just kind of like talk about our thoughts about the season as well as kind of what we think we're gonna see in the future kind of thing. That's kind of how I envisioned it with Invincible, instead of doing like, oh yeah, this episode this happened and this episode, kind of like what we've done with this series. But like I would kind of imagine there to kind of just kind of be a little more free flow, but like, okay, yeah, I really like this about the season. As far as where we're gonna go, as far as things that the comments that I think they're gonna adapt, kind of that's kind of the idea I had for Invincible.
I can see that.
We can definitely play around with the idea. But that is going to be all for this episode of the podcast. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to give it a like and also subscribe to the Men of Culture channel if you have not already, so that way you can keep up with us whenever we upload new podcast episodes. Like I said, finishing up Percy Jackson, and we have more stuff planned in the future that you're not going to want to miss. Definitely hit that subscribe button.
Definitely hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Yeah, y'all take care.